All right. Apologies for that disaster of a beginning. But welcome everyone to Brisbane Azure User Group. So if you're here for something else, this is not the room. So if you're here for Azure, that's good. You're in the right room. And the clicker works. That's good too. So April, that's lucky it's the right month. First of all, big thank you out there to our sponsors. So these guys here, without them, none of this is possible. So they do the pizza, the beer, the room, and a lot of things in between. So big thank you out there to Codify and to Microsoft for helping out. All right, so this is a bit of a community thing. So no pressure. Actually, it's all pressure. We want people to speak. So you don't have to have anything amazing. I surely don't. So just look at what I do, and as long as you can sort of crawl over that bar, you're good to go. We just want somebody to get up, talk about their experiences. It could be anything, preferably Azure. Yeah, probably Azure is good. But what did I misspell?
Adam's name. That's okay.
As long as he doesn't see, we're fine. Anyway, sorry about that. Next time, Adam. Next month, it'll be spelled right. Awesome. But if you've got something to share, let us know. We'd love to hear. So it doesn't have to be the latest and greatest. You know, I'd love to hear about someone using app service. I'd love to hear about somebody, I don't know. I'd love to hear a talk about APIM. Or anything in between, right? So anything that you like. ChatGPT, I don't know. Job opportunities. I'm going to hand that one over to Dan because this is a mystery slide, and he's thrown me under the bus again, but it's all right. I'm used to it.
Keep you on your toes, yeah, if anybody is looking for a new adventure, so and if you have any of those skills, we'd certainly be interested in talking to you. So if you're not familiar, most people think Deloitte is an auditing company or a tax company, and that's probably what they're most famous for. But the largest part of Deloitte is actually its consulting arm, and we have a huge platform engineering team, and we're known for kind of solving people's wicked problems. So if you want a real challenge in that area and you think you're up to it, please reach out to us. You can scan that QR code. You can send to that email address or just talk to me, and I'll put you in touch with the right people. Thanks.
They're great guys and girls.
Yeah, don't base it on me.
Awesome. So there's a few updates this month. Actually, it's kind of like a little bit longer than a month, so there's a few more than. But I tried to remove the ones I didn't like. So if you go, Damien, this part of Azure that I saw, it's not here. It's like, yeah, it's because I hated it. It's simple as that. A bunch of new machines that looked really powerful, and I thought they're really cool to talk about. So some ridiculous numbers there. Yeah, 3.2 terabits per second total. You got it with these ones. You have to get 8. 8's the starting. Eight's your buy-in, and you can go up from there. But insane. So if you're running that to do your AI, you're probably doing something pretty fancy. Static web apps. This was interesting to me. So this was like hidden, squirreled away in a bunch of the updates. So you can now bind to an A record. So for those people that are interested in...
I did at the end of that. I didn't realize it was preview.
Oh, you've already done it?
Yeah.
It's sold to the customer. It's preview. Don't worry. I mean, it's good to go.
It works.
It works. Don't let them know. All right. So something to keep in mind though, like when you do the A record, it does bind to a single instance. So there's a bit of a trade-off you need to consider if you're going to use the A record. I think CNAMEs are better personally, but A record is now possible with static web apps, but just keep in mind that, you know, it's a little bit more fragile when you do that. This one's, so you'll see how this fits into everything soon. Data Builder, interesting idea. It's not so bad. Your immediate response would be, that's a terrible idea. I want to throw up in my mouth. But the idea is you get a web SQL server, or there's a bunch of other things, and it's going to automatically generate CRUD operations and APIs for you. You're able to do through OAuth 2 security claims, you're able to put your own role-based administration, role-based security on those APIs that are generated. So they're not public, they're secured endpoints on your SQL Server database or a few other things. The REST endpoints, they're just CRUD for those entities. The graph ones, you can actually connect entities together and do something a little bit more than just CRUD. So it's interesting. It's an interesting idea. And that has now come through static web apps as well. So static web apps can now host your data API builder. So now you can actually get static web apps. Oh, sorry, the data builder, it's serverless. So that's now a bit of a complete serverless experience. You can use SQL Server serverless. Good to go, and you don't need to write any middleware code for your APIs. It's interesting. Not fully on board, but for a lot of really small apps, maybe it's not a bad idea.
I think that's very similar to what we used to have in 2012, the mobile database API, where you could just use the database as you go.
Yeah, and there's a few other technologies that were built on something similar to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I say, not all in yet, but you know, as soon as you get something non-trivial, there's trade-offs you need to think about. Now, this one here, it was a little bit obscure, but I did find it. This one's near and dear to my heart. This is like the main feature of AAD that they should have shipped 20 years ago. Maybe not that much, but anyway. So for your app registrations, you can now create an AAD app registration. Now that app registration is going to build you a token, like an identity or a bearer token through OAuth 2 OIDC protocol. Now that token has got a set of claims in there. Now, number one thing for building apps, that set of claims was next to useless. It was just rubbish. Well, this one here, through a whole lot of bit of convoluted sort of mucking around, that's a whole lot harder than it needs to be, you can actually call back to your own API to go, with this potential identity token, augment that set of claims and add your own claims, roles, whatever you want to, however you want to think about it. So it's all up to you. Claims. Put that in the token so that when the user presents that token to your app, they've got the claims baked into that identity token and your own custom claims. This is brilliant. It's been a long time coming. And if you're going to build OIDC apps, you know, that's an elegant solution. A lot of people have other tokens and stuff flying around with all their authorization, and it's just like, that's a shit idea. Do that. That's great. So really check it out. If you're building apps, this is amazing. It's just like, this is like the invention of app service or APIM for Dan there all over again. It's that important. Firewall Basic, a good option for a small business. It's not as fully featured as the other SKUs, but it's a lower price point. And you can do most of the stuff. There's a bit of a bandwidth limitation from the trade-off perspective, but it's pretty good. It's a cheaper point. GPT-4, obviously everyone's talking about GPT and all that sort of stuff. Well, that's there. You can use that. It's along with all the existing SKUs. A bit of a process to request access to it, and you have to actually be doing something real at this point in time. But anyway, that's there.
I think only the 32K is super hard to get. The 8K one is
A little bit easier now. They're
a lot easier.
They're rolling back on the.
32K is really hard to get.
It's really hard. Yeah. I mean, it's powerful. So this is pretty cool. We'll skip from applications back into infrastructure for a bit. So Virtual Network Manager. It's like your NSG rules, but at a higher level, and you can actually, so they've got a good table here. It's like, well, NSGs are now being advertised for individual teams, so not your global management anymore. NSGs are sort of migrating their way down to, trying to delegate that control. And then for that global management rules, you can use your security admin rules. And those security admin rules take precedence over your NSGs. And so you can see here that the security admin rule, you can choose to just flat out deny it or allow it to go to your NSGs or bypass your NSGs. So it's pretty cool. And you define it up there in your management group hierarchy. This is a question coming. I can see it.
Oh,
It's like, ask me.
Was that supposed to be as a firewall sitting right there?
All good. DDoS IP protection. So if you've got a single IP and you want to throw DDoS protection across that single IP, this is a cheaper way. It's still a bit of coin. It's not super cheap. But this is a way that you can get that protection at that single point. Especially if you want that, good level of security. Is a bit of a comparison there, a trade-off. And just for Dan, I've got some APIM stuff. So the V2 containers have been released. The V0, V1, they're getting deprecated. So if you're using containers for your self-hosted APIM gateways, time to upgrade. And they can be hosted. Those containers can be hosted on a number of different platforms. And this is in parallel to the Azure Arc. Azure Arc can do APIM as well. This is sort of like in between Azure Arc and Azure. Alrighty, that was pretty much, they were the ones that sort of stood out for me tonight. So I don't know if anyone's heard of this event. It's coming up. It should be pretty cool. So May, I just thought I'd throw that in now because give you guys a bit of a heads up.
It's going to be great.
It's going to be great. We've already got one recommendation. Awesome. A few extra resources. So we do have the Slack channel, the YouTube channel, and a few training resources we talk about. There's some great blogs there that are good to look at. And tonight, without any further ado,
Hi, everyone.
Adam. So we're going to talk about DevBox, Adam.
We are going to talk about DevBox, which is
And I should actually do a proper introduction, shouldn't I? So Adam's an innovation specialist at Microsoft.
I am.
There you go.
That's a proper
That's it. All good.
Hi, everyone. Adam Stephensen, as Damien said. Now, do you mind if I scoot?
Yeah, that's all right. I'll get out of here.
I might, because I'll please. Actually, thanks, Dan.
All right.
So, what I'll do is I will start sharing. And I'll finish that for mine. Yes, that's right.
Oh, and we want to.
Is it?
I don't know what it's going to present. If only we were using a dev box there.
If only we were using a dev box. One of those are.
But you need to show the pain without.
Yeah. Unfortunately, dev box won't fix AV issues.
That's always the selling point. Show the pain.
Show the pain. Okay, this is super no, this is like a super fail. I'm going to go and try a different connector. I don't know why that's not working. So team, just give me.
Would it work back on the other desk?
It was yeah.
Oh no, it would present.
Oh,
Are you using Microsoft Surface?
I am using Surface.
Quick question, would ML.NET with ChatGPT
Help in this situation?
now be a
Oh.
valid session for this?
Oh. I don't know, that's borderline, isn't it?
As long as it relates to
you can deploy it.
If you're deploying Azure resources, yeah.
I mean, it's
And
using
throw
open
bicep in
AI,
there.
but you know,
Yeah,
You
it's
can
the
get-
Microsoft Azure implementation.
I mean,
there is an Azure AI.
Yeah,
yeah,
GPT-4 based.
Yeah, I'm just too lazy to get it.
because it's a lot of work compared to ChatGPT, right?
The last time I tried, there was like a really big form,
Yeah.
and I was just like, nope, I'll just use an AI.
Did it come up at all?
Maybe the form is now smaller.
But if you were doing it to write bicep code,
I could make ChatGPT do the bicep code.
I mean, so I was using ChatGPT for bicep for ages, and it was like fair cop. It was pretty good. Like it's not bad.
Hmm.
Just sucks compared to Bing Chat, and that's not a statement I ever thought would leave my mouth. Was that Bing Chat was or Bing and good in the same sentence? It's just like weird for me.
Yeah, it's a different world now.
It's a different world.
Yeah, you can call Azure Bing browser.
Azure Bing browser.
Edge.
Oh, Edge.
You know what? I'll ask ChatGPT, how can I make this talk?
Yes.
Now.
How that wins.
Just enough to be technically an Azure book.
Just fly under the radar. So what ML?
I'm not on that.
ML.NET, which is offline machine learning. But I could technically
Host it in a.
I could technically train it on Azure ML.
Oh, there you go. Or if you hosted it
Although
in.
I don't think yet for regular data images. Yes.
And how does it compare?
So for small data, I actually gave a lot of feedback to the ML.NET team. And it's actually better for smaller data, the ML.NET.
Really?
Because it actually takes into consideration that the data that you have is actually small, and small data tends to have a little bit more.
If this doesn't work, I am going to log in on your machine.
Just change the one because
It makes
like,
better
I'm
picks
assuming at that one you won't you don't
how
have an
to
HDMI.
data.
I do.
Oh,
Azure ML.
here we go.
And that's why this.
This one is no works.
And there's no way to fix it.
And I'll switch this back to input.
Because I didn't
Other
test
than
earlier.
ChatGPT.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that sucks in Azure ML, but if you remove the duplicates and stuff like that,
The alternative is I run a dev box on your machine.
Well, that's possible. Yes, we could do that too.
Works. Love it.
Okay.
Thanks, Dan.
Awesome. There you are.
Sorry, team, for that little distraction.
Then you can have the share.
Yes. Okay. All right. Where are we at? I am going to shut this down. Sorry about that. Share that way. Awesome. Thanks everyone for coming along. I'm Adam Stephensen. I'm an app innovation specialist at Microsoft. So I work with large enterprise customers, helping them innovate in the cloud. For the last 5 weeks, 90% of my conversations have either been around GitHub Copilot, ChatGPT, or Microsoft DevBox. This is all anyone wants to talk about at the moment. And you know, I'm super passionate about all three, but out of all of them, DevBox is the one that I wish I'd have had when I was working on the tools with JK and Brendan. from a real world solving problems perspective. I do a bunch of presentations. I have an Adobe stock subscription, and this is one of my favorite images I've gotten from Adobe. This image is titled Team of Programmers Working in an Office. I put to you the people that titled this picture have never seen enterprise software development. This is not what software development looks like. There are challenges in software development. Software development often feels more like this. Now, we've learned a lot of lessons. So, you know, Agile, DevOps, DevSecOps, we've taken that part from when we've written the code and getting it into production. We've made vast strides in that area. I wouldn't work somewhere where they told me I had to right click and deploy. If anyone handed me a deployment document, I'd say, we're going to change this now. That's our very next meeting, or I need to go and find somewhere else to work. Because automation and working as a team, changing how we work, has made our lives so much better and enabled us to deliver so much value. There is still, though, at the beginning of the project, as much pain as we used to have at the end of the project. So it's really common now that when I go and start, you know, as you know, I can see a bunch of contractors in the room. You know, you go and join a project, and it takes, you know, multiple days after you start a project until you actually get a machine with the tools on it and access to what you need. You know, and this is where, you know, specifically, I remember I was on a project with the two guys in the back. We were doing Angular back when Angular was brand new. You know, we went and did an Angular 2 project. Then we went off and we did another project. Then we came back and we did a project on a later version of Angular, a new project. And then we did the next project on a newer version of Angular. Then we needed to go back and just do half a day's work on the initial project. So you're uninstalling global dependencies and changing things on your machine to do a small amount of work, and then you've got to go and change it all back again. So global dependencies are a real pain. We were talking about it before. You know, devs need admin rights. You need to be able to install tools. You need to be able to try new things. This is often a challenge. Once you often get those new tools, though, sometimes you find they actually break your machine. And I literally just had to reformat. I did a reformat of my machine just last week because I had some weird AD issue and I couldn't, you know, network changes in the organization, formatted my machine. I didn't care because everything came right back. But, you know, tools break stuff, and you don't want to be breaking when it takes you days to set up your environment. You don't want to be breaking your development environment. I'm a web developer. I do C#, I do JavaScript stuff. I've been roped into mobile projects, and my machine and the bloat on my machine that existed for years when I had to go and do a mobile project was ridiculous. In a perfect world, I'd have multiple laptops. These are all the challenges I faced as a developer. You know, you go and talk to people who are running projects, you go and talk to security and IT staff, and they think we're all cowboys. You go and talk to security and IT around developer machines, and what they want to know is they want to say, you know, we have our trusted senior developers. They've been, you know, they understand our business, they're trusted, they're core parts of the company. Then we also have contractors who come in who are very senior, but there's a different profile, a different level of trust. And then sometimes we just outsource work, bulk work that we just need to get done, low levels of trust. Then we've got our SRE team that have access to production, and they have advanced tooling. All of those groups need very different profiles, different tools, different rights, different security levels. How do we make it easy for security and IT to solve that problem? How do we make it so they know they're preventing data exfiltration? How do they go and ensure that the images and the software for the development tools that they're using are up to date? You know, how do we, you know, provisioning developer machines is expensive. You know, I was contacted by my very first real life DevBox project, wasn't requested by developers. It was the IT team for a large organization. They said, we've just stood up a project. We need 200 developer machines stood up. We don't want to do it. Yes. You know, and then having remote devices, you know, in a hybrid world, developers are taking their machines home. There's a lot more remote work that's going on. And, you know, back to the IT teams, they want, you know, giving developers machines running on Citrix, you know, the level of developer satisfaction with Citrix VDIs is very low. No one's loving that story. Then there's the project owners, and pretty much their pain is all around money. You know, they need to onboard 100 new developers. You know, that takes time. It takes IT teams time. That's money they're paying for those developers to sit around and not do anything. They want to reduce the time and cost that it takes to onboard a developer because they're paying for it. And those delays to projects for onboarding delays the delivery time for the projects. So these are the reasons why, like real world reasons why I wish DevBox had been around when I was actually writing code and I was a consultant. You know, developers, you know, I am going to get off slides. I'm talking a few slides and then we're going to go and have a look at DevBox, spin a few up and put the environment together. But I think, you know, just going, hey, I can create a development machine doesn't give the full story. You know, the organizations that I work with, they know that their innovation, especially now, is, you know, their business success is really tantamount to, you know, how they're innovating. So it's a really critical piece. So this is where DevBox is, what DevBox is really around. The whole idea of DevBox is it's replacing a single developer machine with, and this is the difference, we've got W365. You can go into Microsoft W365 and you can say, go and give me, and this is what enterprises are using to provide everyone with a machine to go and do Windows and Office. And a person comes along, a productivity worker, and they can go and spin up, go into a portal, give me my machine, and it spins them up there. SaaS hosted virtual machine. No one needs to maintain it. They just get a machine with Office, Teams, PowerPoint, all the things they need. What developers need though is this, the key to it is they want ephemeral machines. You want to be able to go in and say, give me my main machine. Give me something that I'm going to work in every day for this particular project. And you go and you choose the particular tool set. Might be an Android image, it might be a mobile image, it might be a full stack image using Visual Studio, you might be a Java developer and it's a different, but there's multiple images particular for different jobs. And you might work on that for the length of the project. If you want to go and try something new, if you want to go and install some new tools, if you need to go and work on an old project, what you want to be able to do is don't break the thing you're working in. I just want to grab another one, spin it up, choose the one thing that I want, grab the code I want, install the stuff I want, break it, play with it. Does it work? Now I'm just going to delete it and stop paying for it. So this is the cloud. You just pay for what you use. And this is what DevBox is really about. The key to that whole line, replacing curated, long-running developer desktops with ephemeral resources, which spin up on demand for any dev workload. Ephemeral is the key to DevBox. You're going to have lots of these things. Storage in Azure is cheap. You're only paying for what you use. It's great for collaboration. And the second meeting I have with every customer is around talk to me about security. I haven't had one customer who's found DevBox, and I specialize in financial services. So I work with banks, insurance agencies, wealth managers. Their levels of compliance are very high. The reason they don't have a problem with DevBox is DevBox is actually an abstraction over the top of W365. So the same tools, the Intune, endpoint management, all of that tooling that's already been built for banks and enterprises and government, all of that, and I don't know that stuff. Like, and I had to go and learn what Intune was when I got into DevBox, because that's just the infrastructure team stuff. But now I'm an Intune master. But you know, it's all the same tools that the security and network and infrastructure team use to secure their machines. That's what DevBox is built on top of. The difference is we've made it ephemeral for developers. Other big changes, because people are going to ask, is nested virtualization is supported. So the difference between W365 and DevBox, nested virtualization, so you get Docker, bigger, beefier machines, and that ephemeral nature. That's enough talking about it. I might do a little bit of show and tell. Here is the idea. So I go and I'm going to start with the developer experience. Okay. Okay, so you can see here is I've just gone to, I go to devbox.microsoft.com, I log in, and it brings me up my list of existing dev boxes. I can just go and open any of those in an RDP client or open in browser. I'm going to start back and pretend I don't have all of these different ones. As you can see here, I've got one that's, I'm playing with some different things. I've got a full stack image, a front end, which is with just front end tooling, and then one with Visual Studio and some mobile tooling on it, depending on what I'm working on. But let's say I didn't have any of those. What does the experience look like for a developer? Day one on a project or day one in a team? They come in here and they click on, they'll just have none of the stuff down the bottom. They go new dev box. They give it a name. They come and choose a project. And I'll come back to why in a minute, but essentially your DevBox configurations are based on, it's not the IT team that specifies what the DevBox configurations looks like. It's the team, it's a team lead or a project lead. So they're able to offer different configurations for different projects and different teams. So you say, what's the team? I could come and say, I'm doing something for the cloud platform team has a list of, different DevBox configs. So they've got a Visual Studio image with 8 CPUs, and actually all the machines are more or less spec the same, apart from the storage. So they've got one Visual Studio image, a Win 11 high performance image, and a Win 11 standard compute image. They look pretty similar, actually. The mobile team, they've put theirs together differently. They've kind of listed the SKUs and different things. I'm going to go and say, I'm going to go and create one for an image from the DevBox pool for the retail teams. So in the retail teams, I've gone and said, I've got a front end image, a full stack image, a privileged access workstation. So that image actually has access to production servers. So it's in a completely different network access to all of those other images. That image actually has access to production, so that the profile for that image is locked down in a very different way to the other images. So you're able to specify based on the user's profile, how did I get access to 3 teams and all those images? It's all based on Azure AD. So I go in and based on the groups that I'm in, that gives me access to different teams and access to different images. So I've got a high level of access. So this is all of a sudden you can see there's massive flexibility with DevBox. Security's loving it. Developers are loving it. It's pretty awesome. So I could come in and I'll come back to this customer image one, which was a typo because I can't type custom without putting ER on the end. So I could come in here and go custom. I'm going to go and create a custom image, DevBox B&E, Azure User Group. That's literally it. As a developer experience, I come in, I give it a name, I say which project I'm working on, and I choose the image that I want to provision, and I say create, and it will go and give me one of these. From a developer point of view, it's that easy to stand up a DevBox. The actual experience of using one, is that one open? Oh, no. The experience of using one, I can come in here and go, I can go and open it in my browser. We're familiar with it. Has anyone not used W365? This is virtual machines hosted as a SaaS service, but where it's a fully managed SaaS service. So I come in here, I'm connected to my virtual machine, and there is I do my login, and I'm connected to my dev machine, but via a browser. Let's go back to, yeah. So it's very, very, very simple. The other experience, and I want to call this out because it took me a while to work this out. So DevBox is the developer offering. Windows 365 is the productivity offering. DevBox is built on top of W365. I went by mistake to windows365.microsoft.com, which is the productivity offering. And so especially people online ignore this in case in the video recording, and we might have to edit this later. I don't know if this is officially supported, but it's a great demonstration. All my dev boxes are showing in the Windows 365 portal. So what I used to do every time, because I use a couple of these dev boxes most days, I would come in here and I wouldn't open it in the tab. I want to open it in my RDP client. So I'd come in here and click on open in RDP client, but then that goes and connects to the individual client. What you can do is if you come in and you connect via the windows365.microsoft.com, you can come in here to download. And when you come into download, you can actually get a subscription URL. And then you can go and connect, you can go and download the Microsoft Remote Desktop for Windows, which gives you the management interface. And you put that subscription in. And now it's listing all of my dev boxes. So now when I want to connect to a dev box, instead of having to go to the portal and click on open in RDP client, I open this up from my pin to my taskbar and I go, oh, I want my retail front end image. So this is the way I do it, all by accident.
Wow.
So that's my actual experience, which is pretty cool. And then once I'm in here, it's just, I've got Visual Studio Code. I've got all my normal developer tools. You'll see this is a lightweight image. It doesn't have Visual Studio and MSD, like SQL Server Management Studio and all that stuff, because this is the one that I like to work in most of the time. Who thinks that's pretty cool?
Adam, are you able to do that through the Microsoft 365 because you're an admin in the organization or something? Would every developer be able to do that?
I don't know. I only found out I could do it today because I was doing something completely different. I went, there's all my dev boxes. So because I don't use W365. But that's a great question, Dan. I'll find that out. I would assume though, because it's worth somebody else trying it. Actually, I should go and try it. But I actually think because a dev box is a W365 image, I think even if you're not an image, an admin, if you went to W365, you would still see the images that the dev boxes that you had provisioned, because you still have to sign in to Windows 365 and you're still just connecting to a dev box that's still managed via W365.
Docker inside the virtualization is huge for me. So I use virtualization a lot. Like quite often when this is my main machine. But if you want to use a virtual machine, you can't then go virtual machine and Docker inside that. And so having VMs you can spool up that are Docker ready is huge. Nested
virtualization. Yeah. Yep, absolutely. Because you can't live. Oh, so I won't do this. So I didn't realize. I was going to say I might come back for another month and actually do GitHub Copilot with code spaces in a demo. And that's actually what I'm working. You can see here in the background. I'm actually working on a Copilot and Code Spaces demo, which is obviously heaps of containers running. So that's literally what I'm working on at the moment in this image. So very, very usable.
Yeah. How are those images configured?
So I wanted to show the demo because then if you don't get anything else, you can go, oh, that's cool, and you can tune out now. Because ideally, it's not that hard, but there's a few moving parts. But from most people's point of view, that's what they care about is the experience. And the short version is it's good for everybody. How it's configured, I'm going to jump back and there's a couple of slides that kind of give you a bit of an overview of let me get the right ones. Yeah. So there's 3 roles that come into play when you're coming. So that was a great segue, by the way. Great segue question. It was literally my next slide. And not a plant. There are 3 roles that we care about when we're configuring DevBox. On the far right, we've got the developers. And ideally, a developer, all they care about is, give me a DevBox. Thanks, I've got a DevBox. On the other end of the spectrum is you've got your security team, your network configuration team, and your organizational infrastructure team. They go and they do things like the network configuration, going and securing what would normally be, the endpoint management and Intune settings, and organizational policies. But then in the middle, and this is where it's different, and this is why we got to choose projects, is DevBox realizes that every team is different and every project is different. And you need to give the person who's in charge of the project the flexibility to provide the images and the capabilities and also the cost a lot of my teams, it's, you know, how much the dev team spends is related to the project they're on in the enterprise. So there's also cost implications for that. So there's a dev or asset team, which is really, I think of it like a team lead role. And what they do is they choose what VM sizes are we going to use, and then what VM images are we going to use, and then what VM images are we going to use on which sizes, and then what users are they going to be available for, if that makes sense. So then that's that level, that middle layer of configurability. What that looks like in an Azure, because you configure DevBox through the Azure portal, is we go and configure a dev center. And basically the dev center is the home where you go and do everything else. Inside a dev center, you go and configure a project, and that project then scopes essentially that's the scope of that middle group, where you can then go and you can have different teams and different images and configurations per project. Inside each project, you go and make DevBox pools, and then dev boxes sit inside a DevBox pool. So, yep.
Oh, go.
So now I'm just going to show you what that looks like in the portal. So literally to go and configure DevBox, you go in here, create a, oh, actually, I'm going to go into, you go and you create a dev center. How am I going for time, by the way?
Oh,
It all starts with your dev center. You come into your dev center and here's where you go and you configure the different networking, the different networks that are available. I'm only running one network in this area. Azure Compute Galleries. So this is where we'll actually, DevBox definitions. So then you come and you create for the whole dev center, what are the different DevBox definitions that are available? So you can see here, I have several DevBox definitions. I've got a Visual Studio 20, I've got multiple, I've got some enterprise, Visual Studio Enterprises, some professionals, some that just have Win11 with M365, the productivity tools on them, and a custom image. JK.
Do you happen to have Windows 11 ARM version of Visual Studio?
I don't. So one of the things that's changing with GA, actually, so I don't know, I'm going to say. Let's wait and see what happens with other compute.
Got a good question. Got images that aren't Windows?
No, not yet.
Not even Linux?
So I would love, obviously, I would love that. The answer at the moment is WSL. I would love to have Linux images.
I mean, for some people, though, like development also means making iPhone apps, which you can't do without Apple.
I would love, so I would also love to have multiple compute. We've got to remember this service isn't GA yet. So this service goes GA.
Yeah, it would be really strange if Windows 365 hosted a Linux box.
Yeah. Well,
Stranger things
stranger things
happened.
have happened.
You can get Linux VMs now, and you can get Linux app services.
Yep.
And you can run function apps on Linux.
Yep.
You
Yeah.
can natively
DevOps
run
build
Android
agents,
on Windows.
Yes.
DevOps build agents.
Thing, man.
We have got to remember though, this is a developer experience. The idea for this is developer experience. Apple would be amazing. I have no knowledge around what's
So
going on.
yeah, Adam, how do you configure the tooling? So that's the most important part. So I understand that the base images are like Windows based and stuff. But
That's
the
a great
tooling.
question.
And
I'm gonna put a pin in that one because it's either going to be the biggest fail or the biggest win.
Yeah, that's an extension of that question is, can you use Visual Studio 2022 Preview?
Well, you could install you could go and get the Win11 image and then store whatever you want on it.
Okay.
So yes, but there's no out of the box one. So when we come in here to create a new DevBox definition, we give it a name and we choose one of the out of the box definitions that Microsoft supplies. So nearly everything you see there is one of these. So some version of Visual Studio with some version of Windows, or some gallery image of Windows or Windows 10 or Windows 11. some with OS optimizations, some, so there's a whole permutations. Other ones, these M365 apps obviously are all of the Office stuff and Teams. And then beyond that, you come and you choose what version of that image, and then you go and you choose what size compute. At the moment, there was other sorts of compute, but we've removed them until GA. There will be more compute options available when it's released. Then you go and you choose what storage is available. I skipped over one piece, and that was, how did this custom image get in there? So some organizations I'm working with are running with this model, with not using custom images. They're choosing the images that Microsoft provides and keeps up to date. They go in here and then they go through and they hit create, and that creates their DevBox image. Once you've done that, then what we come along and we do is we go and configure. Remember, we're in the Dev Center, the highest level. Then we go and we configure what the different projects are that are available. So in here, I've got a cloud platform team, a mobile team, and a retail team. I'm going to have a look at the retail team. Inside the retail team, we go and we create some different pools. So we go and we create some different pools. And these, basically in the pools is where we go and say, we're going to enable, I don't think it's a great name, but I know it's hard, naming things is hard. A DevBox pool is saying, we've gone and created these DevBox definitions. What we want to do inside our team is marry up a DevBox definition with a network connection.
Is that what a pool is?
Yeah. Because what you want to do is I want to be able to go and say, for my privileged access workstation, for example, I want to take this particular image, but I actually want to make it available for this particular network. So I've only got one network connection available, but if you had a production network there, you had VMs that you wanted to be provisioned that were going to have access to production, you'd actually have that privileged access workstation with a particular definition having access to a particular network connection.
So where do environments come in as well? Because that's something that's similar, the idea they can attach to environments. You've got the pool as association to the network, but shouldn't that really be an environment thing, the network? Like what do environments do?
I'll come back to environments. Yep. Yep.
So what else can you configure? Can you scroll to the bottom?
Yeah. So the other thing you can do, and because remember, this is back to the point that I made around, you want team leads and project admins to be able to do this configuration. So this is where they're going, DevBox definitions are made by the IT team. This is what we're going to call it for our team. We're also then going to do that matching of DevBox definition to network. Does that particular user, are they a local admin or are they a standard user? So this is where for a particular team, an admin can choose for their different groups of users who can install stuff and who can't. And then what are the auto shutdown rules? You know, do we shut it down automatically? When do we enable it? All of those kind of things. So that's the difference with the DevBox pools. Dev Center, as well as, and this is almost worth another whole, another talk that is also based around Dev Centers is also called deployment environments. And deployment environments give you the ability for a developer to say, I actually want to take this piece of code and I want to generate an on-demand environment that I can actually deploy my code, my project to on demand. So that's a separate, we've probably got a bit of a backlog of things that we could cover. The other, in the interest of keeping things not too long, the other, so some customers are mainly going with that, and then to actually go and deploy their software, they're going back to their IT teams, and they're saying, we're using these images. This one has Visual Studio, and we're going to use the same tools that we use, which is Microsoft Intune, to actually go and provision when a user logs in. We're going to go and push all the software to those individual teams that they need. So that is actually quite a common pattern where they go in and using Intune, your enterprise can push out software to the developers. I'm not, even though I joked about it, I'm far from being an Intune expert. That's not my favorite way of doing it. What I want to do is I want to go and build my own custom. You know, before you saw a custom image, I want a custom image, and I want on my custom image, I want to have the Azure Developer CLI, the Azure CLI, the GitHub CLI. Someone made a comment earlier about hating CLIs. I want to have, the tools that I use. I want to have, but I want to bake them into an image. I need Node. I might need Angular. I need whatever my front end of choice is. What's the best way of doing that? The old way, and this is where I was kind of, when DevBox came out, I'm like, I want the image that I want. And I used to do this on Azure. I used to go and create dev machines, but having to install all the software on a machine and then sysprep a machine and make a sysprepped image, it's horrible. And I'm like, that's not worth the pain for what I want to do. The best thing is you can define it all in infrastructure. You can define your whole custom image in infrastructure as code. So watch this space. So Scott Holden is a global black belt. Yeah, so just going, oh yeah. So watch this space. Go and follow Scott Holden. He doesn't know I'm promoting this, but he's told me he's going to do the next version of this. But he put this together for me in about 20 minutes. And what this is a bicep template of that base image. So instead of having to install on your software on your machine, you actually define it as infrastructure as code, and then you push it up. It gets automatically built and gets pushed up into that image gallery that then is available when you go through and create your dev boxes. So essentially, there's a bicep file. I can come in here and have a look at the JSON. And the fun part, this one's pretty simple. And this is where there's a more advanced one coming in the next 2 weeks that he's putting together. The fun part is here, where you can pass in what you want to install. So you can see here, he's installing Chocolatey, he's installing VS Code via Chocolatey. So you can see this is the beginning. He's working on a much more expanded one with a common set of dev tools. But essentially what that does is, it takes, you can go and have multiple of these in source code, in source control. At the moment, the way it works is that you come in here and you actually say, deploy that custom image to Azure. So at the moment, I deploy it with a click, but that's just way too much work. I hate having to click a button to deploy something. So the next stage is going to build a DevOps pipeline that actually detects the change, builds the image and pushes it through to the image gallery and then makes it available for you. So that's the next level, and that's a few weeks away.
That's cool, but it's not quite what you want, because all that's doing is it's a kind of code block inside that YAML template that installs Chocolatey. What there isn't in that package is any knowledge of the package they're in there and the versioning, because what will happen a week later is there'll be a new version out. There's no tracking of those versions, those packages through your thing, so you have no idea how up to date my image is compared to all the package, because there's no understanding of the package repository. All it's really done is just this little block of code inside that YAML that goes choco install and the name of a thing without any knowledge of the package versions that are in there.
That's
So,
that's what I was about to say. It's not quite IAC, infrastructure as code.
It's not quite infrastructure as code. You could go through and specify them all individually. So this is based on what I want, and I'm curious because literally I've asked. So this is an ask that I've made of Scott to get done in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
What I want is, I actually want as a generic. What I want is, I want a master image that then I can pass in my Chocolatey commands. So it can spin up, and it can spin up my images for me on demand. But you're right though. Maybe you're sorry.
Why not Winget?
Winget.
Yeah. I'm still.
I mean,
It could be Winget.
It could be Winget, and that's the thing, is it could be whatever you want. You've just got to. But no, you're right. And so I hadn't thought this the whole. So this is that part of it. So there is documentation around how this should work. with creating the images. And I can share that. I don't have that link on me at the moment, but I can share that. This part here is my idea and a friend who put it together for me, that GitHub repo.
I think you made the point that you want to spin up something fast and as painlessly as possible. And that's the best way to go.
Mm. I'm interested that the package infrastructure as code conversation is an interesting one.
Yeah, you could do this using Chocolatey or copy. Oh, well, actually, yeah, from your repository.
Yeah.
Cache that, certainly.
Yeah.
So I would rather prefer this to be managed in Intune. So when Intune provisions your basic image and then saves it as a custom one.
And that most of my customers are going with using Intune. What I want though is I want to be able to, because I play with my things a lot.
And then that problem of like keeping the image up to date would be automatically solved.
Yeah.
The alternative is you just rebuild your images with your Chocolatey commands. So the Chocolatey command is part of your build rather than part of your deployment step. So once a week, you just have an automated build to build your Chocolatey, make an automated step that makes sure everything still works. And then
there are different
you
ways to change that,
on a
but
weekly basis.
you also want like predictability and accountability.
Yeah.
And Choco install VS Code -y, you never know what version of VS Code is going to be installed.
It was the
Or you're
latest
going
one.
to sign in there.
That's always going to be the lowest one.
I always want the latest. So that's my thing, is I just always want the latest one.
It's not always you want the latest one, right? For VS Code, that's true, but not for every piece of software.
And not for the project you've not touched for 6 months.
Yeah.
And you want everything exactly as it was the last time you touched it.
But
Yeah.
you can specify the versions in Chocolatey.
Well, I think it's
Yeah.
good that
Really
that your image
Yeah.
is actually intact in 6 months. Otherwise, everything that could be potentially broken.
I mean, there's a choice, same as anything, it's a choice between fixed versions when you're about to go to production and make sure you can come back to it versus it's early in the project, we want rolling versions because we want the latest.
Yeah,
You can
what
prioritize
about security
those,
patching? Say
Templates as well.
Windows 365 manages the patching and the operating system stability and security, right? Say all those tools on top will not be updated, I guess.
So what you probably want is choco.json.log and then a CLI command choco restore.
Yeah.
But
And then
it
folks
gives you
upgrade.
lots of options. Yeah, there's lots of options. There's lots of options. There's a bunch more slides, and there's a lot more. So has anyone got? Oh, actually, this is the. I wasn't going to go. I was going to go. I do get asked this question a fair bit. Which is just, what is the difference? Because what is the difference between all the different, because there's a bunch of different offerings. We've got Azure Virtual Desktop, we've got Azure Dev Test Labs, there's W365, there's GitHub Codespaces, and there's DevBox. Essentially, all different ways of providing a dev machine in the cloud. The ones on the left, are what we look at as kind of PaaS solutions that are deployed in your customer subscription. So Azure Virtual Desktop, you're managing virtual VMs essentially. Azure Dev Test Labs is an abstraction over the top of AVD. W365 is a SaaS service. You don't need to maintain what's happening under the covers, but it is built on top of Azure Virtual Desktop, but it's a SaaS solution. DevBox is the dev ephemeral version, gives you ephemeral images of W365 for any workload, whether you're doing, mobile Android applications, legacy .NET applications, whatever you're working on. And Codespaces then is for your modern, cloud-centric architectures. So I get that question asked all the time. There's so many different ways of doing it. What way should I be going?
Wait, say that again. Which one's for your old school stuff?
So you can do but basically DevBox, you can do anything.
Because it's a VM.
Because it's a VM. So you can install Android Studio. Yeah, because people go off and say, is it Codespaces or DevBox? Where Codespaces is amazing for your cloud native workloads.
Yeah.
But you can't go and use it for a full framework application.
Yeah.
But code spaces on DevBox is a great combo.
That'd be a good demo.
Well, that's so I'm actually doing that one with Damo in a couple of weeks.
Oh, cool.
So for work. So I was going to say, if we want to do that for an Azure user group, I
Yeah.
can definitely do that.
And you could do container development in VS Code and actually use code spaces within that container in VS Code on DevBox.
That's exactly what I'm doing at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's something that's cooler than that. So that's more or less, how long have I got?
As long as you want.
Okay, I think that's the highlights of DevBox. Not beyond 10. That's my highlights of DevBox. Has anyone got any other DevBox questions?
I tried to create it and I kind of lost, maybe after the talk.
Oh,
Yeah.
how do you do it yourself? That is a great question. You need Intune is the moral of the story.
Oh, okay.
So it's not just about something you can go and, so that's a great question, JK. It's not, you actually need an Azure tenancy, and then you need, so you can go and set up a trial. So, and then you can go and set up a Office you need to have an E3 trial. You can go and add an E3 trial, which gives you, because this is aimed at enterprises. What it does is it gives you then you can do an E3 trial, which then gives you Intune. And once you've got Intune in that subscription, then you can go and spin up DevBox.
I'll send it and ask the sysadmins and say, I need it urgently.
Do it.
Yeah, I found the UI a tiny bit clunky because when you want to create a dev pool, it wants a network. But when you say add network, it wants you to connect to an existing network. So you've got to go and know the right sort of thing to create that creates the network the dev pool's going to connect to. And that's where I kind of fell over and went, busy doing something else.
Yeah. It's not something you can stand up.
That's going to be fixed by the time it goes to I'm assuming like it's going to
Probably.
click through.
And when I try to directly create the image that is compatible with that box, I set everything up. It's just like almost done. And I try to select the CPU, and it's like, there's no available CPU architecture, nothing. And it's like, select, and I have a couple of options, none of them relevant. And I guess that's where the iTunes
You don't have anything available in Intune.
iTunes comes in.
Yeah.
But it doesn't say that.
So the other thing, so we'll save Copilot and Codespaces for another day. The other thing that came up in conversation earlier before we came out is the Azure Developer CLI. Who has seen the Azure Developer CLI? This is my other favorite thing. Anyone who knows me knows I get a bit excited. I have a lot of favorite things.
Azure CLI.
No, this is not the Azure CLI. This is the Azure Developer CLI. I've got 5 of my biggest customers are all asking me for the same thing. So this comes back to how do we enable developers? Like DevOps is great. DevSecOps is a great idea. But at the end of the day, security and infrastructure and architecture in enterprises are blockers to getting stuff done. And how do you make it? How do you get them on board with getting your workloads into production? And the answer, and this is the whole DevSecOps thing, let's get them engaged at the very beginning of the conversation. So I'm working with a bunch of my biggest customers to say, what we want is we want an architecture, but we don't want an architecture diagram. We want a deployable architecture. We want infrastructure as code with the code for the solution. And we want to take that and we want it to have logging and monitoring and the security policies. And we want infrastructure and security and architecture to sign off on it. And once we've got that, we want a tool to then just go for developers to go, oh, there are my 8 patterns that are signed off by infrastructure, architecture, and security in my organization. When I need to deploy something, I'm going to go grab one of those, and I just need to put a little bit of code in the middle because that's all we do, really. It's not that hard. And then I'm going to deploy that into production. Obviously, I'm being facetious, but getting those patterns of pre-approved patterns done is really important. The pattern that everyone cares about at the moment, if I can find my doco, this is all based on conversations we had over before the user group started. And that's how do I look into the camera? This is what you people who don't come in are missing out on, is the pre-conversations over beer. So this is what we talked about is, how do I go and build a chat GPT application that actually has context of my organization? I want to do chat GPT, but I want it to be able to go and query stuff that I know that chat GPT doesn't know. So if you're looking for the architecture for this, just go and look for Azure Search OpenAI demo in Azure Samples. This is what it looks like. You actually go and build an app. You have an app orchestrator, use the OpenAI API, but then we go and we use Azure Cognitive Search, and Azure Cognitive Search then can go and we load into Cognitive Search whatever we want, our documents, our data, our images, all of those kind of things. I'm not going to focus on, I'm not an expert on Azure OpenAI API. Okay. Yeah, so we'll get someone who knows it really well to come and do a session on that. What I want to show you is, this is an example of an architecture that is available in a Azure Developer CLI compliant repository. So this is where someone's come along, they've defined there's a whole lot of tools you need, but really, if I want to deploy this, I can come down into the documents, into the doco, and it gives me what I need to do to stand this up. And it's here. I just need to run this application. I need to do those 2 lines. Do you want to see what it looks like on DevBox?
I want to see what infrastructure, like, is it bicep templates?
Oh yeah, so do you want to go and have a look at the... So, great question. So what we've...
like a bootstrapping, isn't it?
So we can actually go in, and there's a few different things in here. So there is the infrastructure, which is the infrastructure as code, which is the bicep for the solution.
Yeah.
In this one, there's a single app. There's your VS Code settings. There's the GitHub settings, which will be for your GitHub actions. Then there's your dev container, because this actual image here supports using code spaces. If you go and check out this, so this one's only new. I've been doing this demo. I've been working on the Azure. I've been using the Azure Developer CLI for ages. If you go and look for the actual Azure Developer CLI docs, there are a bunch of different templates in here. So these are the templates you can get out of the box. So they are available in a bunch of languages. I've got a lot of my customers use Terraform. There's also, you don't have to use Bicep. This is a Terraform demo. One of the best ones that you might want to check out is if you want to go and do so this is an example. So these are these architecture examples of architectures. This one here, if you wanted to go and deploy a React app using, that's app service on an API, that's a bit boring. But anyway, so what's good about this one is, so this architecture in this repository that you're going to deploy is a React app in an app service talking to a C# API on an app service with Key Vault, Cosmos, and Monitor all configured in a single repo that you could deploy in 2 lines. Cool? Who wants to learn, or who is using Azure Container Service, Azure Container Apps? Should all be using Azure Container
Maybe
Apps.
back up a step there, Adam.
Yep.
So when I think from memory, there's like a certain structure or something that this is coming back to me.
Yep.
There's a certain structure with all the artifacts.
Yeah, so I'm going to jump into this one. I'm going to jump into this one here. So this is an architecture. So in this architecture here, I have this is cooler. So this is so this one is deploying an Azure Container Registry with a React app and an API in Container Apps with Key Vault and Cosmos and Azure Monitor. So if you want to learn Azure Container Apps, this is a pretty easy way to go and get some Bicep to go and do it. So when we come in, we come and we have a look in the assets folder, and here is the, oops, so assets infra. In the infra folder, here's where we've got our main bicep, and then we've got our bicep for the application itself and the application for the core. If we go and we have a look in source, there is the code for the API and the code for the web application. So there's definitely a bunch of config, and it is in a particular format. And that's all described in the
standardization that's trying to happen across the different examples.
It is. There's standardization, and it's all defined in a YAML file.
Yeah.
But it's a great way. Hey, good to see you. It's a great way. So I've often gone, oh, how do I go and deploy this thing? Oh, I want to know how to do Terraform, or I want to know how to use Azure Container Apps. I go and find one of these templates, and then I go and just literally, we can go and pick one. I was going to choose the cool one. But it doesn't really matter which one we do.
And that YAML file, is that a build for the app? Does it have the app build as well as the app release?
No, hang on, you're jumping ahead a step.
Too far.
Too far. No. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to jump into my image. Yeah, let me just spin up a dev box to do this. Doesn't usually take this long. I'm worried I'm going to have a demo file. Are we running? No.
That's because your dev box is shut down at 7.
Oh, it is because my dev box shut down at 7.
You just clicked.
That's actually exactly what it was.
You forgot to click delay. I thought you clicked the delay.
That's actually nice. So this is starting me up my dev box. So this will just take a minute, which is actually better because I was sitting here going, this is really weird. It never takes this long. Am I about to have a demo fail? But it's not a fail. It's just taking a minute. Where was I going with that? Oh, so I'll talk through the issue. So the 3 commands, I showed you 2 commands, but I told you a little bit of a lie. So AZD login logs you into your Azure context. AZD in it, and then you pass in the template name. Okay.
Yeah.
That then goes and finds you the registered template and clones the template to run on your local machine. It doesn't deploy it to Azure.
That's right. Yeah.
Then what you do is you then use AZD up. That then does the equivalent of a right-click deploy. What that does is that then goes and deploys what's in your repository to Azure. To do the pipeline configuration, there's 2 options. There is, and this is where I'm going to jump into because it's not in that other one. When you come into these examples, not into the cool AI one, it walks you through that there's 2 options in here. There's one option for configuring Azure DevOps, and there's one command. So AZD pipeline will go and configure GitHub Actions. AZD pipeline, and there's another piece there's an alternative that goes and configures Azure DevOps.
Right.
Then AZD monitor is actually how you go and configure the monitoring. So there's multiple commands to go and configure the separate pieces, but it's all defined in the repositories.
Sorry, Adam, somewhere along the line you stopped sharing your screen.
Oh,
In Teams. I just noticed. It was working before, but yes.
bummer. Are there people still online?
Well, it's going to be put recording. So.
I might have to, I'll do you a better record. I'll do a fresh recording. Where was I going with that?
So monitor, talk about monitor, because wouldn't that be with your bicep?
Sorry, the monitoring's in the bicep. It's you're right. The monitor command gives you the monitoring outputs. The pipeline commands configure either pipelines or workflows based on, so it won't work in every repository, but see how we've got Azure DevOps pipelines. That's the pipeline config. This is the GitHub Actions config.
Cool. And then how do you do environments on top of So obviously that's an environment, right?
You only get the first one free.
You get the first one.
Yeah.
Good luck.
No, and then you go in and you configure your actions. You go and you've got to add that into yourself,
Manually. Yeah. Okay.
which is it's pretty awesome. Yeah. Who thinks it's awesome?
Those templates, they're all underneath Azure samples. Is there a bigger library? Is it growing?
They're all under Azure samples, but what nearly everyone is doing is they're just stealing stuff. There's another article that talks to you because every organization wants to go and they want their own security infrastructure. So you can do this in a private you can have these in private repos.
So that's a good question. So how does security and infrastructure, how is this adding value beyond what you were currently doing, which was putting your scaffold in an infrastructure repo and deploying out of that?
So I've got a bunch of orgs that have gone and they've said all of these. So I've got a customer that's doing a cloud migration and they've said, we have these 7 patents.
Mm-hmm.
You can only migrate anything that fits these 7 patents.
Yeah. Yeah.
These repos have all been, the monitoring and security, and there is more. This isn't the full answer.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have come because I'm about to volunteer a third talk.
It's interesting. Well, a third talk would be great, but it's interesting because I've seen a lot of customers kind of go, okay, we're going to deploy Bicep, right? Yeah. So single ARM deployment task in Azure DevOps. There's your environment, right? And so that Bicep structure and Bicep files all come from a controlled repo.
Yep.
And you can add a parameter file and you can do your own parameters,
yep,
but you can't touch the Bicep. That's locked down.
Yeah, I've seen that before as well.
It's kind of
you can deploy the template of this is what we think a web app
should
look like.
Yeah, which is very similar to that.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out how does that differ from that. This is more of a.
This has a one-level abstraction.
This is more just a common pattern to structure it in a common way.
Well, so this is, and they're changing it after they get it. The rule is, so they're allowed to change. So the organizations I'm working with are allowing them to do this.
To change
to change the infrastructure. They're allowed to change some things in the infrastructure, and they're
that.
Because it's a
because then they're checking, they're doing in their pipelines and in their DAST and their SAST, and all of their post in their their pipelines, and this is where they can't change so I think it's the pipelines they can't change, and they can't, so they can change their infrastructure as code, but they can't. So they can change their infrastructure as code. Yep, but there are steps that are checked that must be included in the pipelines.
So like when you change your infrastructure as code, you add in GPT-4 into your web app for some bizarre reason. That check-in then goes to a review. Is that how they're doing it? Like so they go, that's crazy. We're not using GPT-4 in our company.
Well, and this is where it all comes to landing zones. Like they'll have whitelisted and blacklisted services where GPT-4 is completely shut down.
If I would want to prevent these things, I'd probably put it in as a policy type thing.
Well, Azure policies is great, right? Like, and do them high up with the management group and get your control up there, and then go nuts with your subscriptions. That's what you should be doing.
Absolutely.
How many places are doing that?
So all
the tools are there.
The tools are there, absolutely.
So all of the places that I'm having this conversation with, this deployable architecture. So this is, we're calling this deployable architectural archetypes, blah, 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 something like that. I can't remember what it was.
So is it just a spin on a Bicep template? Like,
no, well, this is just one piece of the puzzle. So thanks, man.
I'm trying to understand that
before you. So this is cool because for me this enables this is the piece that enables developers. But I don't think you can do that unless you're doing. This is kind of the broad conversation I'm having, where I'm saying, the very first thing you need, if you're before you can enable developers, you need secure, compliant Azure landing zones. You need to have the right policies in place. You need to have all of that enterprise. You need to have a good landing zone with good
101
policies.
stuff.
You need all the 101 stuff.
But that's never done, right?
Oh.
That's a
I've got
challenge.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of customers now who are really, and so the breaches in the last 12 months.
Yeah, I rank things up.
So everyone went and shut so this is my experiences in my financial services customers. Security all of a sudden got the ability to do whatever they wanted to do. Like security got enabled, as they should have, to go, you're a bunch of cowboys. It's gone too loose. We're going to tighten stuff right up. And then the business went, hang on, but all of our competitors are innovating faster than us. So this is my so this is my overview of what customers are. This is my conversations I'm having with customers. Is what they're caring about is faster time to value, improving security, simplifying operations, saving money. Everyone's talking about saving money at the same time.
But are we just talking about infrastructure as code?
No, this is the whole bigger picture.
And
This is the whole everything that everyone's after. This is why
I can see that the pipeline monitoring and the application architecture and the infrastructure landing zone. If you decouple landing zone from the application architecture, so there are two, and then the pipeline is another one, monitoring another one. I think they are composed all of these.
So just best practice activities.
Kind of like that, practice and patterns like that. Hey.
Okay.
But you're starting to extend infrastructure as code to include the actual dev machines they're using to actually produce the code to go in infrastructure and the templates for the projects they're going to go. So you've got some templates for ready to go projects that are infrastructure as code that are pre-approved templates for creating. I've got a new thing I want to build. Well, we've already said you can have a database, a web app, sort of configuration. Having that ready to go in a template that you've got the CLI to pull down.
But the main thing is
pull that down onto your pre-approved work machine.
But it's not necessarily anything beyond the marketing to get the sale, right?
No, this is because one of the big deals is we don't know how to do Key Vault right.
Yeah.
So we're not going to use Key Vault. We don't know how to do monitoring. Monitoring's hard. So our project, why aren't you logging the way to our organizational standard? It's too hard. It was going to take 2 days. I had a deadline. Why aren't you using Key Vault? Oh, because it was a bit of a pain.
Is like, so I've heard people say guardrails, like pre-approved pattern that you just go, like the number one pattern I see is I got a website, I got a SQL Server database, I got a WAF, I've got like storage, and I've got Key Vault and App Insights. And like that's probably 80% of every workload that you do is just you want to build a React app, you want to build an Angular app, you want to build Blazor app. You need one of those patterns.
Can I add something to this? It's a bit more general. So build is happening about 6 weeks from now, and Microsoft is low-key collecting all of the information to figure out what to present, what needs to be fixed up until build, and giving feedback. For instance, if that box is hard to make, say, hey, it's hard to make, and can this be done easier? And it doesn't always happen, but sometimes what happens is that gets done by build because they want people to use that stuff. Might be in preview, but it gets done. That's kind of the point why MVP Summit, for instance, is a bit over a month before build. So they figure out, okay, what's exciting, what should be fixed before build, what the feedback is, so they can prepare. So, but they not only listen to MVPs, they also listen to communities.
Okay, I'm just trying to.
I think it's not an evolutionary change, but it's a value add.
So this seems like landing zones for app delivery.
Yeah, but I mean, you still need the landing zones. You still need your DevSec. You still need your all of your inspection stuff in your pipeline.
But your landing zones is best practices set up for Azure, right?
Yeah. So this is like landing zones for an app, for each app.
For an app. Yeah. And like, sorry, I don't want to belittle landing zones. Landing zones are great because it gives a context to talk about. But really, landing zones is a whole bunch of sales presentation documentation to sell a standard way. That's best practice, but it's to get everyone into a common accepted way to do it.
Because I can see the benefit, I can provide it to the other.
No, I'm just trying to figure out, is this just landing zones for apps?
Yeah.
For example,
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, if it is, that's cool. Like if it's just a sales deck. Like,
Sound
Exactly.
No.
If it's a sales deck to go to the security and the architecture teams and go, we want consistent, executable delivery, and this is really just helping the organization adopt a common, well-accepted, well-architected approach. Great.
yeah.
I'm just trying to understand,
I agree.
or is it something more? Like that's the question, or is it more?
Often the services are rebranding, right? And we sort of know, okay, what's the underlying architecture? Is there anything new? Or it's just a rebrand. And I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I know for me, I often try to understand
The one.
which one is it?
Yeah, exactly. Is it a new service,
So
or is
is
it just
there a new
hiding
technology
out?
underpinning
so-
this?
so-
Or is it just?
I'll
something
give
existing?
another perspective.
Yes, that's the question.
I've come up from another perspective. I'm an architect,
Yes.
and I'm a security guy, and I'm a just infrastructure manager, whatever you call them, without much background of Azure yet. You don't care. Like quite often, I really don't care what the tech guys are doing. I just want to know what's the answer, what's the consistency there.
Yeah,
If we have this thing, then they can answer quite a few questions.
yeah,
And rather than as a solution architect contracted by my client, I go everyone to ask what's your standard, what's your standard, what's your standard,
yeah,
and they say read documentation, read documentation. Landing zone, yeah, solve part, monitoring, solve part, pipeline, solve part. No one solved me a question. I still have to read a lot of things. So when I walk in with this, I said, like Thamo said, I want a scalable web app. That pattern, you give it to me. I probably, if someone built this thing for me, I'll just go, cool. I just give the developer deploy this, it's all good. You have the pipeline monitoring and, so rather than a landing zone for APM, for web, for SQL, for something, I got a very good template for the scalable web design as a whole package.
yeah. Or the organization would take this package and
Yeah. So I don't need to
adopt
shop
it
around. Yeah, I don't need to
standard.
shop around. I don't need to ask around, bag around. I just got this, got it. The developer doesn't ask me anything. Typically, just go, here are the 4 aspects. Otherwise, people normally ask me, what's your monitoring standard? Okay, I'll ask you.
Yeah.
Just go back and forth. And unfortunately,
Yeah, no.
unfortunately, the other challenge is even I got the answer, I can't be sure they will do it because there is always a manual process missing. So this one will automate
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
For developer, it doesn't really make sense because we think we can do everything right. But when I'm standing on an abstraction layer, which I don't have the observability, if the head of asks me, what's your guarantee? I have no guarantee. I said it in the documentation.
Well, so I was all on board until Adam said, oh, and they can change the bicep. And then I was like, well, hang on.
Yeah.
But they can change the bicep, but you can check to see if they've changed the bicep. And this is why different teams are checking different things. So
Yeah.
I've got teams that are checking to make sure the monitoring config isn't changed. I've got teams that are checking to make sure. So like that's in the.
So when you say they can change the bicep, is that
A
like
developer can change the
a
bicep.
developer, not a centralized?
Well, it depends. No, because it's just in a repo, so they can check anything in.
So
But it's often in the pipe. It's the checks in the
Not in secret.
pipelines.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's
It's the
cool.
checks in the pipelines that go, oh, we don't allow that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
quite honestly, I see that's a very big benefit because security is literally killing everything. I have no guarantee. Like I have no guarantee. Every vendor, every developer, every outsourced SaaS provider will do anything. I think this is a good thing for me.
I mean, different teams are very different. I've seen teams with developers just checking code to developers repo, and then the infra have a separate repo, which for me isn't DevOps at all.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah.
That's not DevOps.
Please, sir, can I have some storage?
The issue is the executive never have the time to listen to all these things. All I need to tell is we have a technology using Azure Secure done. Because no one will listen to the developer how they do the best practices in details. Because that's how I see this will help. So,
I'm seeing massive changes. Like the biggest life insurance company in the country just restructured
yeah.
to bring security and ops and on-prem and cloud all under a single person to make them all work together and to be able to bed security.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah, and so that's one of these organizations where they've gone,
That's operational change, right? Like,
and that's
brilliant.
we are restructuring the org because we're going to have someone from security we're not breaking up the team, but there is going to be someone from security who is responsible for delivery of every project. So everyone has every developer project has someone from security has a dotted line into their project.
Yeah.
Who's responsible for making the project successful.
Oh,
And that's this kind of team. And so then when you talk around, the team might change the
as
change
opposed,
the
as opposed to a gate. So,
so I've got a bunch of these customers that are going, we need to stop security from being a gate.
yes.
Security, your job
something.
is to make your job. I know we've just gone through this and you've gone and fixed it. What we need now is your job is to make these teams successful and safe.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
age
which
of
is the-
Form, isn't it? Like there's a security team or an ops team who's in charge of making sure it doesn't go down,
Yeah.
and a dev team is in charge of making new features.
Making it different.
And the safest way of making sure nothing goes down is don't accept any changes.
Yeah, that's true.
Always just fight.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
to actually put them in alignment has to happen.
I have actually a very funny story about security. So you're starting to see when people are starting to work with a new client, when they suddenly have a new laptop next to their existing laptop. So we have people who have now 3 laptops at their desk because they're working with 3 different clients, and each sends them a laptop that basically all it does, it just RDPs to another machine. And we literally have now that you can count how many clients somebody's working at by seeing how many laptops to bring to work.
Gosh. That's gold.
But what interesting thing would be, like, a lot of people don't like to do online, and is it possible to get that image locally so you could run on your own virtual machine?
The DevBox image.
Yes. Yeah, because in some cases you don't really need that tight security. You just want to have a good developer environment.
Actually, I don't know. Now that I think about it,
You could probably do it,
download
but
the
you
image
wouldn't be
Yeah,
able to
you
connect
got
to the
to-
network.
yeah, from the
Dev
image
pool.
gallery, like
The dev pool it connects to a network, and that's an Azure network. So to have that running
Anyway,
on your
since
machine
it's based
to
on
that
virtual
network.
desktop.
it's not a DevBox question anymore, but can you take something? So it's no longer a DevBox question, and I don't. But can you use Image Builder and run an Image Builder? So you wouldn't be running it through DevBox,
Yeah, for instance,
but you'd just be using Image Builder to create a image that then is locally executable.
yeah, you probably still remember the trauma of Time Pro.
Yeah.
So basically, we don't need super high security for it. It's, as long as it's behind VPN and stuff like that, it's fine. And all we want to do is basically have it nicely configured. If you don't have time, just spin up a dev box. But if you want to have high performance,
If
and
you
stuff
don't
like
have
that,
time, just spin up a dev box, and creation of a dev box takes 60 to 90 minutes, as it has said.
well,
I know it's
yeah,
it's
but
like
it takes
it's like
half a
3
day to
minutes.
configure the project.
No, mine like
Used to
It's-
take a bit.
mine takes minutes. Like so that's that one that I started.
But
Yeah. Yeah, it was faster, but when it says 60 to 90 minutes,
yeah,
there
there
is
is.
exactly what I expect from a disposable environment.
Yeah, yeah.
How many people here are writing code on their personal devices? For organizations, sorry, for organizations.
Sort of do.
Like,
I use every
connecting-
machine I can get hold of.
Yeah,
Depending what you
Yeah.
define as organization.
well, like a customer.
If I'm going to the office, I'm taking my laptop, my Mac, because it's lighter. I'm not carrying my bigger laptop. around.
And remote in. By the way, why does the Microsoft Remote Desktop suck so much?
I can.
Yeah, because
I can't use it because it eats all my memory.
and how many people who cannot do development work on their personal device, they have to use a corporate device.
Oh, I've got plans to do that as well. Because I was
Yeah, but it depends on the project. Sometimes you have the tooling that you can't install in a personal machine.
And what sort of ratio, do you think? So DevBox is awesome for that scenario, right? 100%.
Yeah, I'd say 50-50.
About 50-50.
Yeah, I think it's starting to get
Either
50-50 now. So
DevBox is remote desktop, or they give you a laptop, or I can just do what I want, committing to.
Yeah,
But I think my current client, I have all of those options. And then when you get all those options, you go, I'll do it at home, thanks.
it
So
really
just
depends,
one
like-
around DevBox question, I guess the intended use. You get the infra stream, building the images, whoever builds the images.
Yeah.
As the consultant, I go into an organization, expect the image to be there. Someone needs to create the box or the VM, right? And someone needs to assign it to me, I'm guessing. So you might have to fill in the blank here. Or does Dan need to go and like create a new
So they don't.
box
So
from the allocated image?
you're right. I never showed that. So you go and you add Dan into an Azure AD group
Right.
that has access. So there's a group assigned to that. Sorry.
Teams group?
Oh,
Or does it have to be a
It probably has to be a
security
security enabled group.
Yeah.
gotcha. Okay, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
my question still stands. Well, DevBox might be great, but if you have to use remote desktop to remote into it,
Yeah.
there are
you
still
can do
some
it in the browser.
limitations with that.
Sorry.
You can run them in the browser too. We showed that.
Yeah, do you think it's better because all tab is intercepted by your host?
Yeah.
So it's not like you can use all the key combinations to get your work done
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it has to be a native client, but
It's RDP.
RDP,
Yeah.
TSC, MSTSC.
Yeah. Look, honestly, I don't mind. Look, so I use it all the time, and it doesn't phase me at all.
I do, and it freaks me out.
Oh, really?
Is that what's happening? No, I mean not the browser. The remote
Yeah.
desktop. The browser is still something when you have like dozens of tabs. Like
The browser's-
where was that machine exactly?
I find the browser good if I'm going to jump in and jump out of something, but I'm not sitting in it for 3 hours working. I'm not,
Yeah.
not sitting in there.
Yeah.
But so I don't find. So you have memory.
It eats all the memory you can, especially if you do copy paste from your host.
Really?
I find
Yes.
the latency is the bigger.
The latency is not the problem. The problem is
No?
that I have to close it because SQL Server stops working because it doesn't have enough memory.
Really?
Because the remote desktop ate it all
Oh, SQL Server locally.
locally.
See, that's my best thing is I'm never going to install SQL Server again.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be SQL Server. It's gonna be the browser, you know.
Yeah. See what's pinned on my taskbar? That's everything that's installed on my machine.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah.
Actually, does Docker for Windows can it come pre-installed, or did you have to?
No, I installed everything.
Yeah. Well, one other thing with the dev box is how do you like sign in? A lot of software requires accounts.
It's an Azure AD. So what do you mean?
Oh, yeah. So it has to be Docker Enterprise then,
Why is that?
because it supports central provisioning and user management.
But you don't have to use Azure AD. So you can just run.
Yeah, but the thing is then you get a new machine and you have to sign in a lot of your services then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, so there's still that thing where every time I spin up a new dev box from the blank image, I still have to go and sign into everything.
yeah, a single sign-on would be so much better.
And so VS Code, you would have to install
Yeah.
an extension.
Yeah.
For VS Code, you can sign in if you use sync.
Oh, sync. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And you can use
And
that
Visual Studio
containers
works
if
a
you
lot.
don't want to, which is greater.
Okay. But yeah, like it's not. It gives me most like I still need to go and go. Yeah, because I still have to go and sign into.
I have a random question not related to that. Does
Okay.
anyone know anything about that proxy?
Which
No.
proxy? Which proxy?
Microsoft App Proxy.
You mean the Yarn or the other one that's
So the service when you can use enterprise application with cloud authentication.
is that the one that is built in Visual Studio?
No, it's the one that's built in Azure.
In Azure?
Oh,
Yeah, so if you can use an application that's not cloud native with Microsoft Identity that secures authentication to it.
That's
It's actually an app hosted on-prem, really. That's.
Yes, exactly. So the app is hosted on-prem and a proxy can be used to grant access to that app.
What do you want to know?
Microsoft has relatively recently released a thing that is called multi-domain or multi-something applications when there are several URLs that your application is accessible on.
I haven't heard of that. So.
Yeah, so you can configure multiple URLs for one application for different multi-segments. That's what it's called.
Is that like
segmented application.
Part of Azure Front Door, mate?
It's part of Microsoft App Proxy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you can configure a wildcard application and different segments in it.
Right.
Yeah, but my problem with that I couldn't make it work so that you don't have to authenticate using Microsoft MSL to each segment separately. And that's a showstopper for me. Because the one segment redirects to another and breaks it because of the course.
If you shoot me an email, I'll forward it to someone who might have an answer.
Yeah, thanks, Adam moved in.
And are you building new apps using App Proxy?
Sorry?
Are you building brand new apps with App Proxy or?
Not quite. We're distributing a legacy app
A legacy
that
app, okay.
clients want to make cloud native.
Yeah, okay.
Well, not cloud native, cloud
To
accessible.
appear in the cloud. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, if you're building brand new ones, it's like,
Oh, it's not a problem. You can just deploy it.
awesome.
Awesome.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Thanks, team. That was fun.
The conversations are better. You learn so much more.
Yeah.
I forgot how good this user group was.
You come back and we'll give you more.
Very much. The best user group ever.
If you say that, we'll give you two.